I'm responding to all of Shelley's claims and standing again in support of a national cap and trade policy. I'd like to begin with the first claim. She states that it's difficult to set a cap on carbon emissions because the extent of damage is undetermined to the GDP. I have strong evidence that shows that failure to act will result in harm to the economy much greater than the cost of cap and trade. Something called the Stern Report, which was released in the UK in 2006, says that using the results from formal economic models to review estimates that if we don't act, overall costs and risks of climate change will be equivalent to losing at least 5% of the global GDP each year, now and forever. If a wider range of risks and impacts are taken into account, the estimates of damage could rise to even 20% or more of the GDP. In contrast, the cost of action reducing greenhouse gas emissions can be limited to around 1% of global GDP each year. So when you compare these figures, the cost of inaction increases with every year that we don't do something about it, and the estimated cost of the cap and trade program is only 1% of the GDP, compared to 5 to 20% of GDP that comes each year we don't act. She also claims that cap and trade would be far too drastic a change because our economy is fossil fuel based. I'd like to say that we do need a drastic change. Climate change is the greatest market failure this world has ever seen, and there are only 3 elements of policy that are needed to be undertaken to address this. We need an effective global response, and cap and trade offers this. The first is pricing of carbon. We need to establish a price on carbon because right now companies are allowed to pollute rampantly and they're not being asked to pay for it. The second is to support innovation and development of low carbon technologies. This would be supported by incentives under the cap and trade policy. And the third is to remove barriers to energy efficiency. Cap and trade does all these 3 things. Therefore, it's a very effective solution. Shelley states that cap and trade, she expresses concern over the fact that cap and trade distributes permits unfairly and inefficiently. I'd like to explain further the process of distributing permits and explain the reason why the government initially has to do these giveaways. To avoid economic shock, the government has to give some free permits to generate initial economic value. If you're just making companies pay for permits up front, there's no market to be made, there's no trading to occur. So giving away emissions permits is a necessary first step to ensure the long-term stability of the carbon market. According to Tony Johnson, who's a senior staff writer for the Council on Foreign Relations, giving allowances away would allow companies to resell permits at a profit. Companies like utilities should be allocated free permits to avoid rate shocks. And guess who would have to absorb the impacts of the rate shocks? Consumers. So that's why it's very important for governments to at least allocate a portion of the permits to these utility companies and other energy companies so that the costs aren't passed on to consumers and create further recessionary impact on the economy. Shelley basically implies that cap and trade is racketeering. I don't think she fully explains what offsets do. She claims that they reward the largest polluters. Again, there is an effort to contain initial costs, but savings are incentivized. So offsets have a strong impact on cost containment. According to the EPA's analysis of the bill that we're discussing, without offsets, the allowance price would increase by 96%. The cap sector uses all the offsets allowed in the policy. So for every billion tons of carbon dioxide, for example, they're offset by 1.25 billion tons of CO2, which are capped annually. So in order for this trading process to occur, the offsets are traded, and in this way, costs are contained. Shelley expresses concern also for the fact that cap and trade won't force companies to change old practices, and in this way she is right. The whole benefit of cap and trade is that no forcing is occurring. Instead, cap and trade incentivizes this change. So cap and trade will transform the structure of energy consumption to a clean energy economy. Again, according to the EPA analysis of the proposed cap and trade policy, increased energy efficiency and reduced demand for energy resulting from the policy will mean that consumption levels will not be met into the middle of the century, will be met sooner, by 2015. The share of low or zero carbon primary energy, including nuclear and renewables, will rise substantially under the policy. So increased energy efficiency and the reduced demand simultaneously will reduce primary energy needs by 6% in 2020. This is according to the EPA. Shelley also claims that cap and trade will increase costs to households and that will mean that the prices will be passed on to consumers. The cap and trade policy has a relatively modest impact on U.S. consumers and households. And this comes from another analysis by EPA. Household consumption growth between 2015 and 2020 under the policy is projected to only be 0.1 to 0.2 percentage points lower. The bulk of revenues from the program will be returned to households. In conclusion, Shelley states that we have time to develop a plan that will actually work, and I would say that we don't have time. For every year that we are failing to act, that our Congress is failing to pass any type of measure to address climate change, the detriment to the total economy is growing. And according to Michael Greenstone, who's a policy analyst for the Brookings Institution, the social cost of carbon confirms that the price of inaction is substantial. Assuming all nations continue on their current emissions path, the average annual damages are expected to exceed $100 billion in the next decade. If caps are not put in place, average annual damages from greenhouse gas emissions would exceed $570 billion over the next 4 decades. But the combined cumulative benefits of emissions reductions produced is roughly 1.5 to 1.7 trillion between now and 2050. So there's a strong incentive to act now, and I hope that I've shown you why cap and trade is an effective means of addressing climate change.